The COVID-19 became an important test for Quiapo Church on how to conduct virtual and limited religious gathering. While live streaming of Mass every Sunday is not new to Quiapo Church, the daily fully online Masses were implemented when the community quarantine was announced in the third week of March 2020. When the government imposed a modified lockdown, Quiapo Church was allowed to hold activities with limited capacity. In 2021, Quiapo Church decided to suspend the traslación of Nuestro Padre Jesus Nazareno, or the NPJN annual procession. Early masses were held for the devotees to attend instead of the procession. And in lieu of the pahalik known as kissing of the image, the church held patanaw, or viewing of the replica image. During the patanaw, the image of NPJN was temporarily transferred to the balcony of the church fronting Plaza Miranda 2 weeks before the actual fiesta day. In Quiapo, the presence of sacred objects like pictures or replicas of NPJN is an important aspect of performing panata or sacred vows of the devotees. These sacred images are crucial to the understanding of the religious devotion and motivation of the devotees. It presupposes their desire to perform their panata, to be with or close to NPJN. The power eminent from the religious object is believed by many devotees to bring happiness and joy. Before the March 2020 lockdown, the January 9 NPJN procession, or the 2020 traslación, was held and lasted 16 hours. It was the earliest in the last 12 years when the traslación was introduced in 2007. In contrast to the 2015 traslación, with approximately 5 million devotees who attended the 21 hours long procession, the 2015 traslación is still considered the longest religious procession in the history of the Catholic Church in the Philippines. The procession started early morning of January 9 at Luneta Park, passing the streets of Quiapo District in Manila. The traslación of NPJN of Quiapo is an event reenacting the official transfer of the image from Bagumbayan, an area near to the present-day Luneta Park, and Intramuros, or the old walled city of Manila, to Quiapo Church in 1767. During the procession, many devotees want to touch the image of NPJN or pull the 250-meter long ropes of the image carriage. For many devotees, it is an act of faith and a way to perform their panataw sacred vow. But for the Quiapo-based Catholic Brotherhood of Hijos del Nazareno, HDN, protecting the image of NPJN from danger is an act they need to perform for spiritual blessing. It is also an act to earn the highest praise and acceptance to the Brotherhood. The implementation of the social distancing measures prohibited devotees from visiting the church. In 2021, Quiapo devotees marked the feast day of NPJN with limited capacity inside the church. The Metropolitan Manila Police Force also controlled the movement of people within the vicinity of the church. The limited capacity is similar to a self-contained group or religious bubble. A self-contained Catholic Mass in Quiapo is aimed at following the government rules on gatherings. The limited capacity for religious gatherings has suspended the devotees' regular visit to Quiapo to perform their sacred vow of PSP. Although the online experiences of the devotee, especially watching the live broadcasts of the Mass, is indeed a substitute for a sacred site during the lockdown, but for many devotees, performing their devotion, especially their panata, is what matters to them. It can be personal or inherited, online or physical. Either way, it is of utmost importance to both the young and older devotees, whether their petitions, prayers, or wishes are granted or not. Otherwise, a large number of them consider panata as something to be fulfilled. As a preliminary research on the understanding of Catholicism in a shared space, it is objectively studied to contribute to the theoretical discussion and methodological approach to the study of religion in place and space. For Kim Nutt, religion can be located in places, communities, and objects. The presence of sacred objects is an important aspect in the devotees' PSB in Quiapo. The location of the devotees during their PSB, either physical or virtual, plays an indispensable role as a gathering mechanism. In the historical analysis of Catholicism in Quiapo, this study also considered the idea of Lefebvre, Foucault, and Detu on space, knowledge, and power to produce a series of steps to analyze the location of religion. The study of place and space in an ethnohistorical analysis of religion is still evolving. Some of the earliest scholarship on the subjects were generally limited to certain topics such as sacred space and pilgrimage, like for example in the works of the Liu, Liade, and Smith. In Quiapo, whether for religious purpose or secular activities, without a space to produce and shape, ideas and beliefs, as well as principles and values, will remain ephemeral, ungrounded, and unorganized. Moreover, socially constituted space is full of power and symbolism, of complex web of relations, of solidarity and cooperation. Although there were numerous studies associated with place and space, particularly in the areas of embodiment, performativity, and material culture, the impact of place and space had been felt, according to Knott, in the study of religion as much as in the field of social sciences and humanities. In her study of place and space, Lily Kong suggests some key themes for future research, such as sites of religious practice beyond the official sacred, religions in different historical and place-specific contexts, various geographical scale of analysis, different constitution of population, dialectics, and moralities. This study considers Kong proposal on a multi and interdisciplinary approach to the study of Catholicism in the Philippines. This study is both historical and ethnographic, using sources from the archives and fieldwork materials collected in the Philippines from 2013 to 2015, and then 2017 to 2022. Although the main approach of this study is ethnohistorical, which focuses on the contemporary interview data, is used in connection to the global historical processes. A hybrid approach was also utilized that combines face-to-face and online research techniques. In this slide, I would like to introduce a diagram summarizing the conceptual framework of this study. The conceptual tour of object actors, pamumuesto, and commutacio complement the theoretical understanding of place and space in the study of Catholicism in Quiapo. This study used two layers of investigation. First, the importance of Quiapo Church in the history of Catholicism in the Philippines, and second, the devotees' engagement with space for performing sacred vow and the use of internet in their practices. These two layers of investigation help in describing, interpreting how the situated body of the devotees makes sense of their experiences revealed by pamumuesto, or placing of the self, and commutatio, or substituting a sacred site. In this study, the ritual practice and the location of the self to honor MPJN is called pamumuesto. As PSB, pamumuesto is how devotees place themselves in a religious space. Pamumuesto is happening inside the church or during the procession. Commutatio, on the other hand, is how a devotee is substituting or exchanging a sacred site to the actual site. Here, devotees who could not go to the church because of the lockdown or for whatever reason will make their religious practices at home or online and receive the same blessing. Although the Spanish maritime trading across the Pacific Ocean was essentially commercial in functions, this trading system, known as the Manila Galleon from 1565 to 1815, also served as an apparatus for communication and transportation. And through this, Catholicism, particularly the Tridentine Catholic practices, was transported to the Philippines. The implementation of the Tridentine policy is a period in which the ideas of devotion, sanctity, holy, and sacred took a new form and resulted in a complex network of religious ideas that influenced many Catholics for a long period of time. Although the Tridentine ideas of devotion lay out the condition for understanding Catholicism in the context of the Spanish colonial period in the Philippines, as mentioned by Vicente Rafael, the idea of religious transformation emerged through the Filipinos' reinterpretation of symbols and signs, especially in their Catholic ritual practices. The elements of the Tridentine Catholicism known as Baroque were influential in the devotional practices of the devotees in Quiapo. Tridentine Catholicism is the result of the Council of Trent held in 1545 to 1563. While the Tridentine policy were originally directed towards the Counter-Reformation in Europe, this period also resulted in the rise of Baroque Catholicism. In Latin America and in other Iberian colonial territories, Baroque Catholicism became the source of knowledge production and the production of space. In the Philippines, Baroque became powerful symbols and sources of ritual expressions, which are distinctive in showing the devotee's innermost selfhood. In this study, the Philippines and Mexico historical and religious interaction focus on the role of the Manila Galleon in the transmission and transportation of Catholicism in the Philippines. It examines how missionaries, particularly the Order of Agustine Recollects, or Agustinos Recoletos, were able to access the Philippines and the methods they used to expand their missionary activities beyond Latin America. Mexico became an important source of administrative manpower and became the financial center for both the royal government and for various religious orders across the Atlantic and the Pacific. Mexico City was also an important ecclesiastical and religious hub for missionaries destined to Asia and other parts of Latin America. As missionaries bound for this area often had to pass through Mexico. The main argument is that Baroque Catholicism reached the Philippines through the Manila-Acapulco galleon trade. The influences can be seen in the popular religious practices in Quiapo. As a passenger ship, the people aboard the Manila galleons varied according to direction. In July 1605, 14 Recoletos boarded a ship in Cadiz, Spain, sailing to Mexico. They boarded the Galleon Espiritu Santo from the port of Acapulco, crossing the Pacific Ocean. Only 13 missionaries reached the Philippines in 1606. They landed first in Cebu on May 12 and reached the shores of Manila on May 31st. The Recoletos brought with them a life-size Christ carrying the cross from Mexico that became known as the Nuestro, Padre, Nazareno, or MPJN of Quiapo. Most of the Christocentric devotion that were introduced in the Philippines and Mexico were closely related to European practices, particularly during the Baroque period, but the devotional practices can be traced as far as the medieval times. The Christocentric devotion became very popular in the late 16th century or early 17th centuries, following the decrees of the Council of Trent on the liturgy of the Eucharist, the commemoration of Christ's Passion during Holy Week, and the veneration of the images of the saints. In the Philippines, this Christocentric devotion becomes sources of ritual expressions that can still be seen in contemporary places of religious practices. In 2021, the procession of Quiapo o Traslación of Nuestro Padre Nazareno was canceled due to COVID-19 pandemic. The decision was confirmed by Quiapo Church Management and the city government of Manila. Instead of the procession, as mentioned, Quiapo Church held masses both online and physical with limited capacity inside the church. The traditional pahalik or kissing of the image was also canceled, but patanaw or viewing of the image was held at the balcony of the church fronting the historical Plaza Miranda. The pre-COVID-19 translation or the 2020 procession of MPJN ends before 9 o'clock in the evening that lasted 16 hours. The earliest in the last 12 years when the reenactment of the transfer was introduced in 2007. The history of the January 9 procession of Quiapo can be traced back to the official transferring of the image from the church convent of San Juan de Bautista in Bagumbaya, an area near the present-day Luneta Park in Ermita District, to the church convent of San Nicolas de Tolentino in Intramuros, and then to Quiapo Church. The origin of the image was attributed to a Mexican Nujal wood carver who was commissioned by the Recoletos to create a life-size image of Christ. In 1606, the image arrived in the Philippines via the Manila galleon from the port of Acapulco in Mexico. As mentioned, together with the image is a group of Recoletos, and they are the original owner and caretaker of MPJN. According to tradition, the life-size statue was originally of fair skin color, just like the images of Christ commonly found in Europe. Quiapo is one of the 16 districts of Manila with a total land area of 85 hectares. Much of the Quiapo area remains residential in nature, with families occupying the second floor of post-World War II houses, while the ground floors are rented for commercial use. For many devotees, Quiapo Church countless stories of rising from the ruins because of the fires in the years 1603, 1791, and in 1929. Also, the Chinese uprising of the year 1606, and then the earthquakes of 1645 and 1868, the pandemics of 1820, 1882, 1902, 1918, and currently the 2020 to 2022. It was demolished and rebuilt in 1863 and again damaged but not totally destroyed, as you can see in the picture, during World War II bombings of 1945, were more than historical facts that was later attributed to the miraculous doings of the MPJN. Quiapo Church, as mentioned, was burned or partially destroyed, but the image remained intact. NPJN is a life-size image of Christ wearing a maroon robe, as you can see in the picture, embroidered in gold and silver, with a crown of thorns and a diadem that forms 3 silver rays on the head. The image right shoulder rests a wooden cross, reenacting a biblical scene of Christ struggling to stand up after a fall, with a face manifesting pain and suffering. The complexion is black with real human hair. The exact date when the image was transferred to Quiapo Church is still debatable. It was very likely that a replica was made to substitute the image enshrined in Intramuros, which existed until it was destroyed during Second World War. Filipino historians are arguing that the original 16th century image was the one transferred in Quiapo. But there are records saying that before the sacred burning of Quiapo on January 15, 1791, the transferring of the image took place. It was also assumed that the image was moved to Quiapo just a few years before the said date, most probably 1767. This is in line that the image was transferred to Quiapo Church following the order of Basilio Sancho de Santa Justa. Sancho de Santa Justa was Manila Archbishop from April 14, 1766 to December 15, 1787. So it is also safe to assume that the transfer was probably between 1767 and 1787. Sancho de Santa Justa was replaced by Juan Antonio Orbigo de Gallego on December 15, 1788. Gallego was Archbishop Manila until May 17, 1797. Before 2007, the traditional January 9 procession was called Pasan, a Tagalog word for carrying, because originally the image was placed in a carriage designed to be carried on the shoulders. Before the wheeled carriage was used, the image was carried in procession in the streets of Quiapo district. In 2009, the Tagalog term salya became popular. The word is from pagsalya, which means to pull, because the current carriage or andas are now wheeled and pulled by a pair of 50-meter ropes. For many devotees, the rope is a symbolic extension of MPJN's cross. Although historically correct, the term traslación which means the transferring of the image from Bagumbayan to Quiapo. The term only was introduced in 2007. That year was the 400 years anniversary of the arrival of the image from Mexico to the Philippines. Jose Clemente Ignacio has popularized the term traslación. He was the parish priest and rector of Quiapo Church during the 400 years celebration. When Monsignor Hernando Coronel was appointed rector of Quiapo Church in 2015, he continued the translation from Luneta to Quiapo and started the live streaming of masses. The online initiative of Coronel became more popular during the COVID-19 lockdown. Currently, the virtual presence of Quiapo Church on Facebook has 3.5 million followers. The YouTube channel of the Minor Basilica of the Black Nazarene has more than 220,000 subscribers. In Quiapo, performing sacred vow or PSB means two things. First, it is both physical and virtual. It connects the experiences of the devotees in performing their panata by highlighting the interplay of the events and objects. Second, it is used by the devotees and HDN members as a metaphor for gratitude and reciprocity, or the reciprocal process happening to return the favor or debt of gratitude to NPJN. The following slides, I will discuss the role of objects, actors, as well as the notion of pamumuesto and kumutatso to understand PSB in Quiapo. In Quiapo, the presence of sacred object is an important aspect to understand the religious reality of the devotees. It presupposes the image of NPJN is the center of their PSB. And while the devotees are reenacting their PSB, they are using a picture or replica of NPJN that has been placed by holy water, blessed by holy water. For many of the devotees, this picture or replica is not ordinary object, not ephemeral but sacred object that they can keep and place in their family or home altar. According to a scholar, Dietrich de la Cruz, objects from sacred sites are proofs of a most material sort, witnessed and pressed by not just by one, but by many. So the blessing received by the objects and by them can also be shared or transferred to the whole family or community. Sacred objects, according to another scholar, Julius Bautista, whether as souvenirs or for veneration, portrays a kind of transportability of spiritual energy inherent in the religious material culture. The presence of sodalities, confraternities, and other forms of Catholic lay associations is another important feature of PSB. They are crucial in the transmission and continuation of the devotional practices. Sodalities or confraternities, also known as brotherhood, were medieval phenomena that originated from European Catholic communities. Confraternities and brotherhoods became popular in Latin American colonies of space, including the Philippines. Many confraternities in the Philippines had undergone modifications over time. This study focuses on the Quiapo-based Brotherhood of Hijos del Nazareno or HDN. The discussion on the Catholic Lay Association addresses the importance of lay actors to the growth and the devotion to Christ in the Philippines. As of 2021, there are 6 HDN officially recognized in Quiapo. HDN are organized in different barangays of chapters. HDN renew their membership every feast day of Christ the King. While Quiapo was able to conduct their religious activities remotely, most churches in Manila were caught off guard to continue their activities online. During the lockdown, Quiapo Church used social media to reach out to their parishioners and regularly upload news and information. The church reinforced the live broadcast of all masses on Facebook and launched a YouTube channel for live stream of all religious activities. Although the usual religious or ritual practices of many of the devotees, such as attending everyday mass and the Friday devotion, was suspended, PSB at home or in a specific space of puesto is proven also to be effective. One may not touch the sacred image physically, but through the screen, according to many devotees, they can catch a glimpse or gaze of MPJN. While online masses and ritual devotion at home is not the same level as going to a church physically, online streaming of masses and other religious activities provided continuity of PSB. In Quiapo, PSB generates meaning through the interaction of the physical and the virtual space. PSB as pumumuesto or placing of the self is a ritual process that narrates the devotee's religious experience. The experiences and the stories of many devotees were told and shared in different ways and are based on, first, how they are performing their religious devotions to MPJN. Second, how they are interacting with other devotees and introduce their devotion to non-Catholics. And third, how the different historical accounts are incorporated into the formation of the devotee's sense of space. In this study, the use of the Tagalog word pamumuesto or puesto is similar to the Spanish word puesto, which means place or position. For many Tagalog communities, puesto is also synonymous to sacred places in nature like mountains, river, caves, trees, or even waterfalls. While pamumuesto is performed according to tradition or puesto to puesto or place to place, in Quiapo, the placing of self in the physical and virtual space is a ritual act. The practice of pamumuesto in Quiapo has three important components. First, God or MPJN as the source of power and blessings. Number two, the devotee or receiver of power or blessings. And last, the space or the puesto. PSB as pamumuesto is how devotees are making temporary homes for themselves, for others, and to MPJN. Many devotees viewed their own homes within a larger community, seeing themselves as religious beings dwelling in a place as well as crossing in space. And their final destination is to return to the sacred. Through their practice of pamumuesto, devotees are overcoming not only the boundaries of the physical space, they're also joining the other devotees either from the same communities or from the other places virtually. And for them to be able to PSB, they are likewise sharing the place and space with the people who govern them. For example, the elders in their family, community, or group who guides them on the proper expression of their devotions or religious practices. Before the pandemic, Quiapo Church was able or already known for its virtual activities through live streaming. As mentioned earlier, the two main platforms used by the church is Facebook and YouTube. Although the majority of the devotees describe that online masses is better than nothing at all, and that the social distancing and religious bubble to some extent help in controlling the spread of the virus, but a good number of them noted that the internet cannot really replace the expression and of receiving the Eucharist and attending other religious activities in person. In Quiapo, PSB is distinctive in showing the devotee's kalooban or inner selfhood. The devotee's sense of self is connected to his or her sense of space. The space occupied by the devotees could be the actual site for PSB or a substitute sacred site. The practice of visiting a substitute sacred site is known as comutacho. The idea is for pilgrims or devotees who could not go to Jerusalem for whatever reason could make the pilgrimage to Rome and receive all the same blessing. Here, Rome is an example as a substitute place for Jerusalem. Alternatively, if pilgrims or devotees could not make it to Jerusalem or Rome, a local church could be a substitute. The term commutatio is from a Latin word for exchange or substitution. In Quiapo, the practice of substituting a sacred site is part of the new normal of religious activity due to COVID-19 pandemic. Commutatio is both collective and personal. While virtual PSB has a collective aspect through ritual practice in an imagined community, it is also a personal journey, a way for devotees to construct their own paths for PSB. In Quiapo, PSB is not simply substituting the physical sites or the physical sacred sites, no? But also about the virtual space the devotee is occupying. It is not just about viewing and looking at the screen, but also encountering others virtually. It is performative imagining and transporting the mind of the devotees to the sacred. It is imagining NPJN and reenacting their PSB in the actual sacred site, which is Quiapo Church. The historical development of Quiapo Church, including the narratives of the pandemic, the miracle stories and tales of miraculous survival, as well as the episodes of the transferring and returning of the image of MPJN, may in fact be some of the most significant events in the growth of the devotion to Christ, no? And how it has changed over time. In Quiapo, performing pananta, either personal or inherited, occupy a singular importance among the devotees and HDN members. A large number of them view PSB as an act of returning the favor or utang na loob to MPJN. It is also a form of sacrifice, tiis, magtiis, whether their prayers or petition are granted or not. What is important for them is for their PSB to be fulfilled either as a lifetime commitment or can be passed on to the next generation or any member of the extended family. In Quiapo, PSB is unique in showing the devotee's innermost selfhood or kalooban. PSB is about sharing of space with other devotees. It is symbolic and performative. During PSB, the interplay of the bodily gestures, the text, words, and objects are believed to convey the messages of the essential truths of the devotee's actions. While it raises the issues regarding the relationship between the physical and virtual, PSB for many devotees is an effective ritual practice. Thank you for listening.